Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. This is Gabby Spartz with member of R&D Ian Duke, and we are here in round 5. If you're just tuning in, our players are done with their limited portion of the tournament, and we are currently moving into round 5 of Constructed. We're ready to watch some sweet games of Standard. People have brought awesome brews here, and I am hearing that our players are ready. And are you ready for some magic?
Oh yeah, this is going to be a great round.
Our players are ready. Let's head down to the feature match area. Hello and welcome back to coverage of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad here from Madrid, Spain. This is Gabby Spartz with Ian Duke in the booth, and we're getting ready to watch a matchup of Seth Manfield versus Jon Finkel. There you go, that's Seth Manfield on the left, our world champion right there, and on the right we have Jon Finkel. They are currently resolving mulligans. I believe they have both mulligan to 6, if I'm correct. And the matchup currently is, this is a cool one, Ian. We have Esper Control being piloted by Seth Manfield versus Seasons Past by Jon Finkel.
Yeah, these are some pretty cool decks. This Esper Control deck, it's actually not a Dragons deck, which is, I think, what a lot of us would have expected, but leaning heavier on Planeswalkers, actually.
And our players are underway. We see a couple lands for each of them. You know, both of these decks are a little slower, especially with something like Seasons Past. Do you want to talk a little bit about Seasons Past?
Yeah, this black-green deck is pretty nutty. I was talking to Huey Jensen before the tournament, and I was like, do you guys like your constructed deck? Did you have something new, or are you just playing one of the stock decks? And he's like, no, we're playing something pretty sweet. You're going to like this one, Ian. And sure enough, I do like this one. I won't spoil too many of the surprises, but it's a black-green control deck. It's sort of a tutor-based control deck with lots of 1s and 2s of, and then Seasons Past is its big haymaker to kind of take over the late game.
Very cool. There you see a copy of Seasons Past. A new addition from Shadows over Innistrad. Seth Manfield is going to anticipate and take one card, play a land, and go.
So taking a look at the player's hands here, we'll give you a peek at Jon's hand. Looks like he's got option of Kalidas, Trader of Get this turn. Not at its best against an Esper Planeswalker heavy deck, but I think Jon just wanted to use his mana efficiently and get something onto the board to pressure Seth and make him react to it.
I've heard good things about Kalidas in this metagame so far from talking to players. It's very good. The ability to exile is pretty important against some nutty things that the decks in Standard are doing right now.
Yeah, it seems great against the white weenie deck. It's a good blocker. It can gain you life. It seems awesome against the black-green Aristocrats deck that we saw from Channel Fireball. So probably a card that we'll see more of throughout this Standard season. Yeah,
it's fantastic at just stopping any of the triggers and just generally shutting down their engine. We're going to see a draw from Seth and a pass. So not a lot of action on Seth's side of the battlefield. Clearly still being a control deck, though.
Yeah, and likewise, not a ton of pressure from Jon. I think Seth is sort of happy to just keep making his land drops, and taking 3 a turn from Kalidas is not a big deal. Jon, on the other hand, taking a look at his hand here, it looks like, Dark Petition is a card that I'm a little bit surprised to see in this deck. But looking at the deck lists, it does look like Pantheon is running 4 copies of this card. This, of course, the Demonic Tutor variant from Magic Origins that we've actually seen play in older formats as well, including Vintage.
And that Dark Petition is going to see a Spell Shrivel, so it's not going to resolve. Spell Mastery was not online either, so not that much of a loss in that situation. Might be able to turn on Spell Masters in the future, though. It does get exiled due to Spell Shrivel. Kalitas rumbles in for 3.
And we see another really interesting card here from Jon, which is Nissa's Renewal. This is a card that hasn't seen a lot of play in Standard up until this point. Yeah, pretty interesting way at taking over the late game here, just getting a bunch of lands onto the battlefield and gaining some life.
And Nissa's Renewal is the card that you would more typically see in ramp decks, but what role do you kind of think it's fulfilling here in Jon's deck? I mean, gaining 7 life against anything in this current metagame is pretty nice.
Yeah, well, I mentioned before I was chatting with Huey about the deck, and we were joking about how Standard has gone in the past seasons, and I was like, yeah, I bet you really want to go back to the world where you get to play Sphinx's Revelation, because that was one of your favorite cards. And he's like, well, Ian, we are playing Sphinx's Revelation this time. It's just in the form of Seasons Past plus Nissa's Renewal. I was like, yeah, that kind of does a little bit of a mock Sphinx's Revelation, so I like it.
Calictus is going to get in there for 3, putting Seth Manfield down to 11. Fun fact, Seth Manfield has a 65% win rate across 16 starts at different Pro Tours. He's currently ranked number 1 in the field.
That is an amazing win rate at the Pro Tour. I mean, it might not sound like much to winning 2/3 of your matches, but when you're talking about, you know, the biggest stage in Magic playing against the best players in the game, that is just a phenomenal win percentage.
And interestingly enough, Jon Finkel has played over 900 PT matches played overall.
Wow.
That's very impressive. Member of the Hall of Fame as well. We're going to see Nissa flip for Jon, revealing a duress. So duress is going to take a look at Seth's hand.
And why don't we take a look at Seth's hand as well here on the right-hand side?
He does not want to let us see his hand. Well,
wow.
we can see it here, but he decides to conceal information in the situation and not show Jon any more of what's going on in his deck. What do you think of that decision?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty reasonable decision. I mean, Seth was stuck there on 4 lands for quite some turns, and Jon pulling way ahead in terms of mana production, as well as having a Planeswalker on the battlefield. I think Jon was a huge favorite to win that game there, and it definitely makes sense for Seth to conceal that information.
Yeah, good decision by Seth. That's going to do it for Game 1 here from Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. We'll be back after these messages.
Qualify for the next Pro Tour on Magic Online. Go 5-0 or 4-1 in a preliminary to advance to the finals. You can see the full schedule at mtgo.com. There's never been a better time to get into Standard. Set rotation and Shadows over Innistrad have altered the format's landscape dramatically. Blaze a new trail at Friday Night Magic. For more information, visit magic.wizards.com/FNM.
Hello and welcome back to coverage of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Gabby Sparts with Ian Duke in the booth. We are going to take a look at one of our back matches. We're going to do a live look-in into Brad Nelson versus Alan Sun. Here we see Alan Sun is playing Boss Humans is the name of his deck. And Brad Nelson has brought...
This is the
ramp deck.
red-green ramp deck with Pyromancer's Goggles. So this is the Team Eureka brew. We saw a little bit of it last round in one of our look-ins, but we'll take another look here as well.
Yeah, so what did you think of this deck? You got a chance to cover this previous round, correct?
Yeah, it's a big surprise to me. It looked really powerful when we looked at it in the last round. Matei was, he had 2 World Breakers on the battlefield. He was going with Pyromancer's Goggles, copying things like Magmatic Insight and Tormenting Voice, which are excellent spells to copy, as well as a Chandra Flamecaller too. So plenty of haymakers in this deck, plenty of powerful plays and card draw. Looks like a great choice for the metagame, honestly.
What do you make of the fact that Pyromancer's Goggles, it's been in Standard for a while, but this is it kind of making a resurgence in some ways? Yeah,
I think a big part of that is the really powerful cards from Khans of Tarkir and Fate Reforged rotating out means that some cards that were lurking just under the surface can now have their time to shine. So it's really exciting to see those cards pop up again.
So Alan's going to play out his hand. He's both going to play a Talius Lieutenant and Anafenza as well. Having the Always Watching out there is pretty nice, but that Anafenza Kintry Spirit is going to see a Fiery Temper and go down. Still has the Talius Lieutenant, though.
Yeah, it looks like Brad Nelson with a pretty commanding board state here. Lots more lands in play, and the powerful World Breaker on the battlefield as well. Looks like he uses Tormenting Voice to cash in an unneeded card for a couple more new ones off the top.
Hedron Arc is a really nice one here. It's going to help him draw even more cards in the future. And Kozilek's Return is going to take care of pretty much all of Alan's board. This game is not looking well. It's not looking very good for Alan so far.
Yeah, definitely true. Looks like, yeah, Alan dropped to 5 with the World Breaker and under pressure from another attack decides to scoop them up.
Yeah, Kozilek's Return looks so good in the current metagame right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a little bit short, only doing 2 damage on the first cast, but if you can ever flash one back from your graveyard, so to speak, it's really, really devastating against a lot of the top decks.
And that's enough for that game. Now we're going to take a look at one of our other back matches. We're taking a look at Dazani versus Dan Lanthier. We have Dan Lanthier playing Bant Company, and Jeremy Dazani is on... He's also on Bant Company, so we see a little bit of a mirror match.
Yeah, it looks like Dazani has a little bit of a twist as far as his list goes here. Yeah, no, I think that the Bant Company description there is maybe not correct here. So we'll get that updated for you guys pretty soon. But we do see Matter Reshaper, Eily Eternal Pilgrim, and a Catacomb Sifter on the battlefield for Dazani. So definitely a little bit of a twist on the mid-range type theme here.
It's Abs and Coco is what we're currently seeing right here.
Counter here, he fights there.
Splashing colorless for some Eldrazi, of course. Have we seen any of this deck before, Ian?
I haven't seen this so far today. I've seen some various brews on the internet and in previous tournaments kind of exploring this general area. I mean, Collected Company, just such a powerful card. It invites you to explore all the different color combinations with it. And in this case, it looks like Dazani has actually added some colorless mana as well to his deck, which is awesome for me to see. Having led Oath of the Gatewatch, I'm really pleased to see those colorless Eldrazi getting integrated into a wider variety of decks, which is definitely one of the goals we set from within
That's
R&D.
awesome. I love it. Yeah, no, so it looks like it's splashing for, there are a couple of creatures that don't hit due to Collected Company here, Archangel Avacyn being the main one. But Archangel Avacyn is so powerful, it almost doesn't even matter. Almost everything else in this deck is a hit, though. We're talking Eldrazi Displacers, Matter Reshapers, Nantuko Hust, of course.
Yeah, Eldrazi Displacer, a card that I think we'll probably see more of throughout the tournament. Just a really, really powerful card in general in these creature mid-range mirrors. It can do things like, exile tokens and they'll never come back. It can take out Hangerback Walkers. It can tap down blockers to get through for damage. Just a versatile card. It does ask you to add colorless mana to your deck, but it looks like Dazani decided that was worth it for him here.
So Catacomb Sifter, yes. Catacomb Sifter dies. He does get to scry, but Jeremy at a very low life total at this point. We see a copy of Reflector Mage in Dan's hand. And it's going to take care of that Matter Reshaper. Back in hand, attack with everybody, and that's enough. Dan Lanthier is going to take this game down.
Interesting to see those Stratus Dancers coming in. I wonder if those are out of the sideboard, maybe to stop opposing Collected Companies.
We're going to move back to our main match, our matchup of Jon Finkel versus Seth Manfield. So what do you think of this matchup in general, Ian?
Well, it's really interesting. I think we can characterize them both as control decks. Traditionally, we think of control decks as blue decks, but in this environment, blue is not necessarily the best color at generating card advantage. We're lacking just sort of a staple divination variant, and cards like Epiphany at the Drown Yard have not shown up a lot in these high-level tournaments so far. So it looks like Pantheon has actually decided that eschewing blue entirely and just going black-green gives them sort of the best late game, or at least the best versatility in terms of threats and answers and card advantage. On the other hand, from Seth Manfield's point of view, he's got a lot of powerful planeswalkers here leaning on copies of Narset Transcendent, and it may be that their team decided that since blue doesn't have the raw card draw spells that it often does in Standard, that the planeswalkers are the best way to generate card advantage for this deck.
Yeah, no, this is a very, very cool deck. I also see an awesome finisher. We haven't seen much of him, generally speaking. Sphinx of the Final Word.
Yeah, this is a pretty cool card, also from Oath of the Gatewatch. We sort of put it in because Standard would be lacking. Pearl Lake Ancient was the card rotating out, that this is sort of taking the place of being a control finisher. So we like to add cards like that, even if we're not sure if they'll show up, just so that they can be there in the environment in case the control decks are really strong that can help to end games.
Very cool, very cool. So our players have kept both their hands. We see a Plains for Seth Manfield and a Swamp for Jon Finkel. We're going to see a draw. I've also heard talk about Anticipate getting better in the metagame right now. I heard from a lot of people that they felt like it was pretty bad, just in general. But it's looking a lot better now that there's no Siege Rhino in the format.
Yeah, I think the format's, generally, well, I mean, the White Weenie decks are quite fast, but aside from that, I think the format has slowed down a little bit more. There's no more Atarka Red, at least showing up in the numbers that it was pre-rotation. So you have a little bit more time to set up your draws and smooth things out. Makes a lot of sense.
Transgress the Mind from Jon is going to allow him to finally see what's going on in Seth's hand, the information he concealed in the last game. And Transgress is going to take down Narset Transcendent.
Yeah, it looks like Seth with a little bit of a clunky hand here, though he does have that Anticipate that we mentioned to smooth things out a little bit. But Sphinx of the Final Word, definitely not a card you want to see in your opening hand.
Oh, definitely not. Little clunky. What do you think of Narset Transcendent in this deck? There's 3 copies of it.
I really like it a lot. It's a really interesting choice. I think coming into the tournament, a lot of us expected the Esper decks to be leaning on dragons, Dragon Lord Ojutai, and a lot of the dragon reveal cards from Dragons of Tarkir. But instead, it looks like Seth decided to go with the Planeswalker route, and honestly, it makes a lot of sense to me given the metagame.
So we're seeing discard and discard right back. Seth Manfield cast Duress, taking a look at Jon's hand. Jon's hand's got Dark Petition, Anissa. So we know at least it definitely hit. A couple of lands as well.
Yeah, Jon's hand looking pretty decent. I'm sure we'll see that Nissa come out next turn. So that gives Jon, a steady stream of lands to keep hitting. We will see if Seth goes for the Grasp of Darkness or the Dark Petition. The Dark Petition being the more powerful card as the game goes on, but we do know that Seth has Kalitas, Trader of Get, in his hand, and he may want to try to get that out, knowing that Jon, doesn't have another answer to it besides the Grasp, at least for a few turns.
Grasp of Darkness making it a better decision to also play Black-Green Control, because it's so difficult to cast if you're trying to play 3 colors as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tough decision here for Seth. It's definitely going to sculpt the way this game plays out. He decides to go for the Grasp, Ian.
Yeah, and that indicates to me that his plan is to try to get the Kalitas out next turn and just start pressuring Jon on board a little bit.
Unfortunately, Jon drew a Transgress Mine this turn.
So that gives Jon the option of playing his Nissa and spending all of his mana on this turn versus playing the Transgress and taking out that Kalitas before Seth can land it on turn 4. And yeah, I like going with the Transgress here because Jon, having taken a look at Seth's hand recently, knows that it's pretty clunky, and without the Kalitas next turn, Seth is just going to have to probably play his 4th land and pass, most likely.
Yeah, and he sees a wealth of options here. Kalitas, Ruinous Path, and Sphinx of the Final Word are the targets for Jon.
So I assume Jon's going to go with the Kalitas here just kind of as a tempo play, because that leaves Seth with nothing really to do on his next turn. I mean, it could be tempting to take the Ruinous Path to protect a Nissa and try to get that to stick, or to take the Sphinx of the Final Word if Jon thinks that he can't answer that in the game going long. But honestly, we're so far away from Seth playing that Sphinx that I don't think Jon needs to worry about it right now. Jon also has plenty more discard options in his deck, and with the Dark Petition, he can always fetch up a Transgress or something similar later on in the game to take care of that Sphinx.
Yeah, that's a really nice interaction, too, about this being a somewhat tutoring deck. He also has a read. He knows that Seth took the Grasp of Darkness for a reason and can expect certain cards from Seth's hand, so I think that might be part of the reason he also chooses to Transgress in that spot. We're going to see Nissa. I'm getting word that Brad Nelson is up on one of our back matches.
And that's, of course, playing that red-green ramp deck with Pyromancer's
with
goggles.
the goggles.
So, yeah, really cool to see that deck succeeding.
We're going to see a copy of Nissa Vastwoods here for Jon and a pass back to Seth.
So Seth continuing to hit his land drops, which is just what he needs here, trying to eventually get his way up to that Sphinx of the Final Word.
So this is going to rumble for 2, putting Seth down to 18. Now it's going to do it. Jon drew a copy of Nissa's Renewal. Ooh, Dark Petition by Jon. And it resolves.
Yeah, really interesting to see what he gets here. Not having seen this deck in action before, I'm really not sure what his go-to spell would be here. I mean, he could go for something like Read the Bones and cast it for free off the 3 black mana that he gets, or he could just go for something even more powerful and try to take over the game while Seth's shields are down, so to speak. Of course, meaning that Jon has a pretty good idea of what Seth has in his hand, and that does not include a counterspell, only the Ruinous Path as an answer.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what he took from it. Dragon Lord Ojutai is the card for Seth. We're going to see an untap for Jon. It's a copy of a swamp. How good do you think Dragon Lord Ojutai is now? With what's going on in Standard in general?
It's definitely a little on the clunkier side. I heard a lot of Esper Dragons players sort of bemoaning the fact that the deck has gotten a lot clunkier since there's no dig through time to support it.
Sure.
It's still just a really powerful card, though, and I think we're going to see it be pretty powerful in this game as well. I mean, even just a single hit, if it gets through, is really going to swing this game in Seth's favor. So it's a kind of card that I think isn't necessarily super well positioned in the metagame right now, but it's just such a powerful card that you have to respect it.
It also has a lovely interaction with Always Watching, which you can't ignore.
Yeah,
Because
that's
it is
very
so
true.
beautiful. And not having to tap never leaves the shields down. We're going to see Jon playing. This is Renewal. Gain 7 life. Flip Nissa into Sage Animist.
And this is a nice play by Jon because by flipping Nissa, he gives Seth a tough choice whether to attack Jon himself and get Dragonlord Ojutai's trigger, his anticipate trigger, or attack Nissa. But if he does attack Nissa with Ojutai, then he doesn't get to look at 3 cards and pick one. It only happens if it damages a player.
Do you think Seth is probably... It looks like he's going... he's going at Jon's face.
Yeah, and I think that's probably because of the Ruinous Path that we know Seth has in his hand. So he figures he can get the value out of the Ojutai and also spend his otherwise dead removal spell. Well, not otherwise dead in the matchup, but otherwise dead at the moment is what I mean.
Also, you know, if you're Seth, that Jon has his shields down right now, there's a lot of removal that could potentially kill this Ojutai at instant speed. Obviously, you know, all bets are off when you untap. But at least this way he gets 1 more card out of the deal.
Looks like Seth perhaps pondering that Ruinous Path there, but reconsidering.
Interestingly, he can't cast Ruinous Path for Awaken currently. I don't know that he has anything else in hand that he wants to save it for, but that Nissa's going to start drawing so many cards for Jon. He does have to take care of it soon. We see a copy of Jace, Bryn's Prodigy for Seth. And look, he chose not to kill the Nissa on this turn.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. I guess that has to represent a counterspell or perhaps some kind of instant speed removal spell, although I am surprised not to see Nissa getting taken down by the Ruinous Path. We'll try to take a look at Seth's hand and maybe make sense of that turn there. So there's the Sphinx that we already knew about, the Ruinous Path we already knew about, and the last remaining card being Spell Shrivel.
Yeah, so what you said is definitely correct. He decides not to put his shields down, not take care of the Nissa this turn, but hold up Spell Shrivel for anything that Jon might do this turn. Looks like Ruinous Path is going to try to take down Ojutai. I'm also getting an update from our back table. Shota is up a game. He had to steal a Zulaport Cutthroat to actually win that game.
And a brutal sequence of events here. It looks like after the Ruinous Path, Jon has gone for Seasons Past, which is sort of the hallmark card of this Black-Green control deck, but Seth Manfield's Spell Shrivel is enough to counter that, and even more to exile it as well, which is a big deal because a second copy of Seasons Past would be able to bring back the first copy if it weren't for the exile clause there.
That is pretty brutal, and it looks like Seth's decision not to tap out at that point really paid him off right here. Jace is going to loot. Seth has drawn a land for the turn. Deep in the tank. He decides to anticipate. Discard Anticipate. And we're going to see Jace transform. Now, are there any relevant cards for Seth in the graveyard? We know Anticipate's there.
I think there is a Duress in the graveyard, which is possibly a reason why Jon went for the Seasons Past, even knowing that Seth likely had a counterspell. Of course, Jon knew that Seth had the Ruinous Path in his hand, declined to cast it, which strongly suggested that Seth had a counterspell in his hand. Jon chose to cast the Seasons Path anyway, and that was probably because he knew Jace would be able to transform and flash back the Duress, taking the Seasons Path regardless.
Yeah, that's a very cool sequence. Yeah, very well thought out and a very cool sequence by Jon. But Seth is going to be able to take care of that Nissa with a Ruinous Path as well. So now Seth is sitting on his side of the battlefield with Jace, and Jon unfortunately has nothing in hand, and we know a Llanowar Waste. Did he play as Land? Yeah, he still has a Llanowar Waste in hand. I think he might have drawn a copy of Dark Petition.
Oh, and if so, that's a huge pickup for Jon Finkel, allowing access to just about anything in his deck this turn.
There it is. It is a copy of Dark Petition. And it's going to resolve.
Dark Petition, a really cool design, harkens back to old school cards, Demonic Tutor and Dark Ritual, both in the same card.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about Dark. Were you involved in the making of Dark Petition at all?
You know, I forget exactly who made the card. I was on the Magic Origins design team, and this was a card that appeared in the design file relatively early after we settled on Spell Mastery. So it was definitely one of the first Spell Mastery cards that was made, and I think it was such a cool design that it just stuck all the way through, which is great.
And Ian, here we're going to see the true power of this deck. Dark Petition tutored up a Seasons Past, and look at everything that's coming back from the graveyard right now.
Wow. So that's a Transgress, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Ruinous Path, and another Dark Petition. And what's really cool here, Gabby, is that the Seasons Past actually goes back into Jon's library as the bottom card. So Dark Petition can fetch it back up again. So you actually get to just keep looping this over and over again.
This truly is a Sphinx's revelation.
So
you
yeah,
you split it up in a couple cards, but you're going to gain that much life, and you're going to draw that many cards.
Yeah, this is really cool seeing this in action.
Yeah.
We may actually see, you know, Jon Finkel's black-green deck actually out-control Seth Manfield's Esper Planeswalker deck, which is not something that you'd expect, I think, coming into this tournament.
We're going to see Negate is going to take care of that Dark Petition, so no more Seasons Past coming back. But Seth still has to worry about all the other cards that Jon was able to draw out of the first Seasons Past. Yeah, we're going to see Hissing Quagmire Rumble attacking Jace, putting him down to 1.
Good.
An Evolving Wild and a pass back to Seth. Hissing Quagmire, one of the creature lands.
And Seth now just totally out of gas with just the one card he drew that turn. We don't know what it is quite yet, but it certainly didn't look like anything very exciting.
Yeah. So if you're Seth here, what do you think you're trying to do given the turn that Jon had, the insane turn he had a couple turns ago? How do you get back in this game?
I think Dragonlord Ojutai is maybe one of your best bets here. I do see a second copy in Seth's sideboard, so he may have access to one more of those. Planeswalkers would be great, although Seth knows Jon has a Ruinous Path in his hand. So I think it's going to take probably multiple turns of Seth drawing powerful cards and multiple turns of Jon drawing, relative blanks, which is not a great spot for Seth to be in, to be honest.
Definitely not. So Ruinous Path with Awaken is going to try to take down this Jace. It is successful, and the Llanowar Waste becomes a 4/4. He's going to animate Hissing Quagmire and Rumble for 6.
What are you at right now?
I'm at 22.
Putting Seth down at 12. Yeah, and things are looking pretty grim here for Seth. Evolving Wilds and a pass back to Jon. How many lands does Jon have in play at this point?
I was just thinking the same thing, Gabby. That's what amazes me here is just how many permanents Jon has on the battlefield, how many lands he was able to get up with that Nissa's Renewal.
Yeah, he's going to fire off a second copy of it. Gain another 7, going up to 29.
This has been pretty impressive so far. I think I'm rooting for Jon here, if only so he can see this deck more later in the day.
This deck is so sweet.
I'm pretty excited.
Do you know that Jon Finkel has over 600 lifetime pro points?
Now I do. They call him one of the best in the game for a reason.
Yeah, no kidding.
So in come those lands again, knocking Seth down to 6, and we could be seeing the final turn here of the game, depending on what Seth is able to come up with.
I think he. Did you not have?
Looks like an end of turn Evolving Wilds just to thin the deck a little bit, maximize Seth's chances of drawing something useful. Which, again, at this point, maybe he's even looking for just a removal spell to take out that Llanowar Wastes and buy a little bit more time.
Yeah, unfortunately, he still has to deal with a hissing Quagmire, even if he manages to take care of the Llanowar Waste. So we're going to see a pass back to Jon. Hissing Quagmire is animated. Here comes in, and Jon takes the match. 2-0 versus Seth Manfield. We are finally seeing the power of Seasons Past. This deck is awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch more of it throughout the tournament.
How do you think this deck is positioned against something like humans?
It's tough to say. I think I'd have to see the match play out. But what I really like about it is it is a deck that is able to play Languish. I think coming to the tournament, a lot of players knew that Languish is one of the awesomest cards against both the white humans deck and also pretty good against Bant Company as well. But looking for a shell that can actually play Languish was a difficult thing to come up with.
We're going to take a look at one of our table matches, or one of our back matches. We're looking at Jeremy Dizani versus Dan Lanthier. Just as a quick reminder, if you're just tuning in, Dizani's playing Absent Company, and Dan Lanthier is playing Bant Company. Currently, Lanthier leads 1-0. There are so many Death Mist Raptors in the yard.
Put a counter on this. And
yeah, Jermoka's command is going to be able to take care of that Eldrazi Displacer. Not before Jeremy activates it one more time, so. He's going to blink Avacyn.
And that, of course, makes all of his creatures indestructible as well. Pretty cool interaction there.
Yeah, very cool. It does tap the Avacyn, though, and Lanthier has a lot of permanence on his side of the battlefield. I'm going to see a draw from Lanthier. There's a lot of gas in his hand. He has a copy of Jace, Eldrazi Sky Spawner. How do you like Eldrazi Sky Spawner in these Band Company lists?
It's really interesting. Definitely just a metagame innovation for sure. We saw it last round. It was pretty instrumental in blocking a Griff's Booned creature out of the humans deck, which is pretty cool there. And I think just flying in general, like it sounds silly to say, but I think flying is well positioned in this metagame. With all these decks that are great at producing so many ground creatures, just being able to zoom over the top is really important.
We're going to look at one of our other back matches. We're looking at Yasuoka. Where is it? Yeah. Shota Yasuoka versus Matt Severa.
And these decks here are listed as Shota's playing Esper Dragons against Matt Severa with Black-Green Aristocrats. So I don't know whether or not this is the same version of the Black-Green Aristocrats deck that other Channel Fireball players were playing.
Matt Severa tests with Ultra Pro, so my assumption would be that they are on the same list.
That they are on the same list, okay.
Yeah. Let's take a look at what's going on here. There's a lot of zombies on Shota's hill, and those zombies have come. I have gotten word those zombies came back after Akalitas was able to create them after a Languish. What do you think of this matchup? Do you have any sense of how this plays out?
Well, I haven't taken a very close look at Shota's list just yet, but I think a deck that has access to Kalitas and Languish already has a pretty good head start as far as having some game against Black-Green Aristocrats. That said, I mean, these Aristocrats decks are tenacious, I guess, by their nature here. Lots of tokens, lots of resilience and recurring creatures, which can traditionally be a headache for control decks. So without seeing the exact lists and kind of poring over them, I would say, you know, it's going to be a pretty close matchup and could go either way.
So Matt Severa is going to play another Zulaport Cutthroat and is rumbling in with one of them, putting Shota down to 15. Shota does have an army of zombies, and they're pretty good at blocking those Zulaport Cutthroats if they do want to try to rumble. Looks like only a forest in Matt's hand, unfortunately. And that Jace is getting pretty close to an ultimate. Not that that will necessarily happen. Will be pretty exciting, though.
Yeah, it's not too often you see the Jace ultimate.
So the zombies are going to rumble. Liliana's going to block one of them. And the Zulaport Cutthroat is going to get in front of the other one. This is going to cause Liliana to transform. And he's going to get a zombie back. So that's a very nice exchange for Matt, though. He is going to have to deal with all these zombies that Shota has currently.
And I assume that Shota Zombie did not die on the block there because Liliana had received a -2 power from Jace.
Yes, I assume that that is what happened. Another copy of Zilliport Cutthroat for Matt.
Logging.
So a couple options for Matt here. We could see a minus ability on Liliana bringing back Elvish Visionary just to get a little bit of card flow going. That's one possibility. Could see a plus ability on Liliana, just sort of trying to tax Shota's hand a little bit. Yep,
Yeah,
looks like that's the choice.
He decides to go for that. Land is a discard for Shota. The zombie's going to attack, putting Jace down to 6 and a pass back to Shota. Caves of Coilus is a draw.
So it looks like Matt's plan here. I think he attacked with the zombie, knowing that Shota could always use Jace to give it -2/-0 before combat anyway, so it wouldn't be a very effective blocker, and actually decides not to activate the Hissing Quagmire and defend Liliana, just letting her die.
So it looks like all the zombies are able to take care of the Liliana, and we see a tick down targeting, or a tick up from Jace rather, targeting that zombie. That's an 0-2. We're going to take a look back at our main match between Dizani and Lanthier. So taking a look at the players, they're off to the races. Evolving Wilds versus... Evolving Wilds is a card that I did not expect to see in Standard as much as I have. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now.
Yeah, it was a little surprising to me internally when we first started with this rotation and actually realized how important Evolving Wilds was to these mana bases. Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of one of those glue cards that holds things together, and when you have a lack of better options. I guess it's particularly surprising coming out of a world where you could play 4 or 5 colors very easily. With just super powerful mana bases. But yeah, we're back to the real world as far as mana is concerned here, and you actually have to be a little bit conscious of what your mana base looks like and how many colors you're playing. And but Evolving Wild's one of the key cards that enables 3+ color mana bases.
So moving post-board here between Dizani and Lanthier, do you think either of these players becomes significantly favored? Are you maybe somewhat still the same? This is a pretty grindy matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to still be pretty grindy. I would say Dizani probably has a leg up both pre and post sideboard just because of the presence of powerful cards like Avacyn and Eldrazi Displacer. I think Dizani is going to be favored if the game sort of stalls out into that mid-range grindy phase of the game where both players are just clogging up the board and have lots of extra mana to do things with.
So we're going to see Eldrazi Sky Spawner for Dan Lanthier. Get a Scion. Scion very good in this deck. Helps him crank out more. So many of his spells are very cheap and interactive. It helps him just, pump out a couple of them more quickly.
Yeah, definitely true.
Plains is a draw for Dan. We see a copy of Collected Company in his hand as well. And he's going to go ahead and main phase it. So he found a copy of Reflector Mage. It's at least one of the hits.
Yeah, it looks like maybe even 2 copies of Reflector Mage there. Could be the choices. Deathmist Raptor being another possibility.
It's cool to see how this deck has evolved because in many ways this feels so similar to some of the rally decks. Even though it, plays significantly differently if you have tried playing it out. It looks like Reflector Mage is going to take care of one of Dizani's creatures and a copy of Deathmist Raptor onto the battlefield. Dizani's board does not look very good against this.
Yeah, this looks like a case where Dan is just off to a faster start here, and that's really dangerous for Dizani. As I was saying earlier, I think if Dizani can get into a stalled out board state where he's able to start leveraging Eldrazi Displacer, he'll be in really good shape, but looks like for the moment he's on the back foot. Do you see a copy of Collected Company in Dizani's hand, so he may opt to just go for that this turn rather than playing out some creatures from his hand. And I think that's probably his best way to catch up on board here, so it makes a lot of sense to see that.
So Catacomb Sifter and Matter Reshaper are what Dizani finds from that collected company. So his board is catching up back again to Dan's.
Yeah, that's actually quite a nice collected company. I mean, Matter Reshaper in particular is really great on this board because it threatens to trade with any of the non-flying creatures that Dan has on the board, and honestly, that Dan has in his deck.
Dizani, of course, is Pro Tour champion from Theros, Dublin in 2013, and he was also Player of the Year in 2014. He already has 10 GP top 8s from only 44 appearances. That's a crazy conversion rate.
And you can see Dizani sporting the Haruruya shirt. That's Tomoharu Saito's shop in Japan. Those nifty sleeves. I always like seeing those.
Yeah, they're very cool. They're very cute, too. Lanthira was the winner of GP Vancouver 2015 and GP Quebec City in 2015. I'm going to see the Sky Spawner rumble. Pinging for 2 and then on top back to Jeremy Dizani. Caves of Coilus is the draw.
So Lanthir adding a Sylvan Advocate and a Jace Vryn's Prodigy to his board on the previous turn, which could signal a transition into that longer, grindier mid-game that we often see in these collected company mirrors. So we'll see how Dizani decides to navigate this. I think he's got to be pretty happy that the board didn't get a lot more aggressive, I guess, from Dan Lanthier's standpoint. Although with a 6th land, that Sylvan Advocate and Lumbering Falls could represent quite a lot of damage. So we will see.
Yeah, also, he does have 2 copies of Collected Company in his graveyard, so even though there aren't that many cards, when that Jace, if it sticks around and if it does transform, it's going to be a huge headache for Jeremy. Caves of Coilus for Jeremy was a draw. Getting close to maybe transforming that Nissa. It's going to be a nice form of card advantage.
So taking a peek at the rest of Dizani's hand, I do see something pretty spicy in here. There's a copy of Hallowed Moonlight. This, of course, being an instant that basically prevents creatures from entering the battlefield in unfair ways, is the way I like to think of it. So this will stop a collected company from putting creatures on the battlefield, for example. And also, notably, it'll stop creatures from returning to the battlefield after being displaced by an Eldrazi Displacer. So a pretty cool sort of utility card there that I imagine came in off the sideboard for Dizani.
Yeah, that's a very cool interaction. There's also 2 copies of Sylvan Advocate, which are going to be very impactful in this game.
14.
Yeah, we see the first copy right there. No creature lands for Jeremy, but if they ever do come down, they would be very good. We know that there's at least a couple copies of Hissing Quagmire.
Draw. That's good.
So we're going to see a draw step from Lanthir.
Looks like he picked up a copy of Declaration of Stone off, Declaration in Stone, rather, off the Jace loot there. Just deciding what to discard. Might go with the Death Miss Raptor just to get some value off that later in the game. Probably wanted to keep that forest in hand, being his 6th land for the Sylvan Advocate that he has.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There goes a copy of Death Miss Raptor. And I just got word that Brad Nelson takes down his match in one of the most incredible ways I've ever heard. Through a Pyromancer's Goggles and a Fall of the Titans for 20 points of damage in 1 turn.
Oh, wow. Fall of the Titans. That's a card we haven't seen yet out of that green-red ramp deck. Very interesting.
Yeah, Fall of the Titans is particularly nice if you get to copy it. So
I'm thinking of
looks like that's how you get to 20 points of damage in a single turn. Got word that Matt and Shota are tied up at 1-1, and it's going down to the 3rd game. We're going to see an attack here from Dan. A lot of his creatures rumbling in.
One card in hand.
Yeah.
One.
Looks like Sky Spawner, yeah, Death Miss Raptor, and Sylvan Advocate are all getting into the red zone.
And keep in mind here, Dan Lanthier's Sylvan Advocate is leveled up to a 4/5 here with that 6th land. Dizani's is not quite yet.
Damage.
No. Sack.
Yeah, so the Scion's going to go under the bus right there. Sack for mana. Get to scry from the Catacomb Sifter. Push it to the bottom.
Mana floating. Judge, if I resolve the damage, can I still have my mana floating? I have 1 mana with the token. Right here. Okay. If we resolve the damage, I still have my.
So the way this game stands right now, Dizani under a little bit more pressure on board, and as far as life total is concerned, with that Eldrazi Sky Spawner chipping away. However, Dizani with a relatively full hand in comparison to Dan Lanthier. The one thing that is going to sort of turn the tables is if Dan can get that Jace to transform and start flashing back those collected companies, he could very quickly recoup that card advantage and assemble a pretty dangerous board. So one of the things Dizani is looking for here is some way to answer and get rid of that Jace, you know, be it perhaps a Declaration in Stone, or some other sort of removal spell.
We did see that Dizani got to scry from one of his creatures dying in the last combat phase, and he liked, ooh, it was a copy of Tragic Arrogance. He left it on top. I was going to say he likes that card.
I see, that makes a lot of sense, and that is a way to deal with the Jace here. So I would not be surprised to see that be Dizani's turn right now.
Yeah, and this is, he also has a grip full of cards, so, you know, after Tragic Arrogance, he's going to be able to deploy a lot of these things. But currently, as it stands, Dan has such a commanding board position. Though, Dan Lanthier does have quite a bit of Death Mist Raptors in his graveyard, or he will have 2 after Tragic Arrogance. So those are pesky. Those recur, and they're annoying. So he's going to have to figure out how to deal with those as well at some point in this game. We see a copy of Matter Reshaper, and I think,
12, right?
You're at 12.
was that always watching in Dizani's hand? I don't think he's playing that card.
That might be the Hallowed Moonlight that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. That will be good for any potential collected companies that Dan is able to draw later on in this game.
Yep, and as you talked about the Death Mist Raptors being a problem later on, that can at least stop one potential way for recurring the Death Mist Raptors. I don't believe it'll actually exile them, but it will sort of safeguard against one morph coming off the top for Dan Lanthier.
11.
So I think we're going to see it right here. 5 mana. He has to take 1 point of damage and Tragic Arrogance. You can't be happy if you see this if you're Dan.
So we'll see probably that Scion get sacrificed.
Yeah, so Dan's going to flip that Den Protector up. He can get 1 card back from his graveyard. He's going to choose Collected Company. And now Dizani has choices as to what everybody gets to keep.
You keep Reflector Mage.
Yeah, Reflect Your Mage makes sense to leave as Dan Lanthier's only creature, just the weakest with no real special abilities now that it's on the battlefield. And Dizani in turn keeps his Sylvan Advocate, which now is leveled up to a 4/5. So that was a huge, huge turn there for Jeremy Dizani, just really, really equalizing the battlefield and leaving Dan Lanthier with not a ton going on. Now, I bet Dizani wishes he had 1 extra mana here because Dan Lanthier is going to go for that Collected Company, and it's a lucky thing for him that he went for it on his own main phase because Dizani does have that copy of Hallowed Moonlight in his hand.
Yeah, and I think that's a trap that you could easily fall into if you haven't played the format a lot or you're not familiar with the metagame. But yeah, if Hallowed Moonlight were able to stop this Collected Company, that would have been awful for Dan. But look at this. This was pretty good for him. Eldrazi Sky Spawner and a Scion, and Den Protector is not quite as good, but Flyers are pretty good in this matchup.
You can go.
Yeah, it's been pretty clear from the way this game has turned out that Jeremy Dizani's deck does not deal very well with that Eldrazi Sky Spawner. And yeah, it seems kind of embarrassing to get chipped away for 2 damage each turn by this lowly, limited common flyer, but it's been doing pretty good work for Dan.
Limited All-Star, show it some respect.
Yeah, or I guess modern constructed All-Star as well, I should say, or formerly known as.
Former. Just to give you an update, we have 2 minutes left in the match so far.
Attack.
So second copy of Sylvan Advocate and Archangel Avison for Jeremy Dazani. That's one good top deck.
I would call that a big deal.
Yeah, this is a big deal. Archangel
Taking out
Avison
that-
getting in front of that. Yeah.
Finally getting revenge on the Eldrazi.
Getting in front of the Eldrazi Sky Spawner, and it's down. Now this is a serious clock that Dan has to deal with. Another copy of Catacomb Sifter.
Deck.
Yeah, and so, wow, and they all have Vigilance too. So all of the creatures are going to rumble. We're going to see a Chump from Dan. He's still taking so much damage each turn. Yeah, puts him down to 8.
And Dazani now just in a fantastic spot. Remember, still holding up that Hallowed Moonlight, so even a top deck Collected Company or a Morph or Megamorph creature will not really be able to get Dan Lanthier back into the game.
So Catacomb Sifter comes in, sacrifice it. Jeremy can take a look up.
Stop.
Oh, he decides he likes the top card of his deck. He's going to use the mana from Eldrazi Sky Spawner, or sorry, the token rather, and play Matter Reshaper. So Dan's going to thin out his deck and hoping to draw something impactful from the top. But we know that this copy of Hallowed Moonlight is going to make it very difficult for him to climb back in. Not through Collected Company, at least.
Yeah, I struggle to think even what Dan Lanthier could come up with here. He may have his own copy of Tragic Arrogance somewhere in his 75.
Both die. I have a trigger on this and this.
So Archangel Avison is going to flip, putting Matter Reshaper. Matter Reshaper trigger puts Matter Reshaper on the battlefield. All of his creatures get to live, and Dan takes 3 damage from that. And that's enough. That's the match. Jeremy Dazani takes it in 3 games over Dan Lanthier.
That was a pretty nice one. It's pretty cool seeing Dazani's sort of slight spin on the Collected Company deck. And it looks like he's set his deck up pretty well for those pseudo mirror matches.
We're going to move back to our last table match between Matt and they actually had a time extension. They had a 5-minute time extension because they had deck checks earlier today. So we're going to get to see the end of this, hopefully. Looks like Dragon Lord of Jutai is rumbling and a Jace, an active Jace on the other side of the battlefield. Shota's looking pretty good right here.
It's his end step. I just activated Abby.
Yeah, I just need to know why.
Yeah, I'm at 10, and he's at 13.
So it sounds like we have the judging staff or the spotters just coming in and clarifying exactly where we are in the game, making sure that as we head into time here that we're on the correct number of turns. Oh, excuse me. It looks like with the extension there are actually 4 minutes left in the round. So just getting caught up and making sure the players are playing at a reasonable speed here. Of course, Shota, a player we don't have to worry about playing quickly because he is always playing at a blisteringly fast speed, regardless of the situation of the match. So
he's not scared of Blister Pod. He's playing blisteringly fast. Copy of Westbale Abbey for Matt. Have you seen Westbale Abbey be good this weekend so far?
I think I've seen it in one match so far actually turn into Ormondal or threaten to do so. Although I think it was mostly the threat of it that mattered, which is often true with that card.
He is getting close to the point where he could get Ormondal, but it's also scary to do that against a control deck. We're going to see Ultimate Price is going to take care of the Zulaport Cutthroat and untap. Shambling Vent and Ojutai are going to rumble. They also get to connect, so he is going to get to look at the top 3. We see Swamp, Island. I think that was a copy of Duress. Oh no, it's Kalitas.
So Shota looks to be in a commanding position here. We don't know for sure what is in each player's hand, but it looks like getting a peek at Shota's, he does have some power there for sure. We'll see what Matt Severa can come up with on the other side of the table. Looks like a handshake is all he has.
Yeah. So Shota's going to take it in 3 games versus Matt Severa. Esper Dragon's looking really good. He plays so fast. It is so impressive. And that's going to do it for all of our feature matches here. Those were some really cool decks, Ian.
Yeah, I've really been enjoying what we've seen from Standard so far. definitely looking, more diverse, I think, than the first couple tournaments of the season were looking. So, yeah, this has been an awesome Pro Tour, and I can't wait to see what the next couple rounds bring.
I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting the goggles deck a little bit more in the
for
feature
sure.
match area.
I want to see a 20-point Fall of the Titans
Yeah.
on camera. That'll be great.
Another really cool interaction that you were talking about earlier was Magmatic Insight.
Right,
with
yeah, or
Pyromancer's
Tormenting
goggles,
Voice
or
also. Both great cards with
Yeah.
Pyromancer's goggles.
Yeah, no, it'll be very cool to see, it's something that I heard you guys talking about earlier is as Standard becomes new, it's not just new cards coming from the new set, but new cards getting a new life.
Yeah, very
in many
true.
ways. So it'll be cool to see what the decks are doing in this, in this Pro Tour. We still have a lot of Magic left here for you guys, but we're going to send it over to Rich at the news desk and see what he's got for us.
Much to Gabby Sparts and Ian Duke. I hope you enjoyed that round. They will be back together for the next round. We've got 5 in the books, so we're down to about 12 players with a perfect record now. It'll go to 6, and then there'll be 2 or 3. But right now, as we look at results coming in, Luis Scott Vargas is 5-0, loves his deck, loved his limited deck, loves his constructed deck so far, over Robert Wallenstein, who was playing in his first Pro Tour, remember. Thiago Saporito is 5-0. So's Craig Wesco. Wonder what he's playing. We'll find out in a bit. Petr Sahurek of the Czech Republic. We keep mentioning his name. Maybe you can't put the face to the name yet, but remember the name. He's up to 5-0. Great start to the weekend, and it looks like his standard deck, whatever he's playing, don't know that yet, is the real deal, and he is very, very good. Valentin Makl of Austria, 5-0. Brad Nelson, 5-0. Christian Calcano of New York is 5-0. And on 4-0-1, so still undefeated, Pedro Pereira played in 4 Pro Tours, a losing record from those first 4, but really pulling it together here. So that's where we are right now. As we continue to see as results come in, I see Kenji Samura is up to 4-1 over Ricky Chin. Emmanuel Gershenson of Austria is up to 4-1. So meanwhile, across the studio, we have a special guest lined up to do a deck tech. Now, it's Craig Wesco, so why don't we find out what he's playing?